Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Podcana episode 35. This week, we're joined by Thea Booysen off the back of Lorcana's biggest tournament to date, which all of the Podcana team participated in. We did have Moyen top 8. We actually had another tournament occur last weekend as well, and we're going to be talking about that list because it was pretty spicy. But first, just want to thank you, Thea, for coming on the podcast and appreciate everything you're doing in the Lorcana space right now, specifically with these online tournaments.
Thank you so much, Brendan, and thank you, Kawa, for having me. I was really excited when you asked me to come by. And yeah, thanks for participating in the tournament. It was so much bigger than I thought it would be. Honestly, I was just sad that I missed out on the one that took place a week before that. So I wanted to do one so I can participate. And then 400 people turned up and I had to just sit out and cast instead. So we'll just keep doing them until I get a chance to participate in one.
Yeah, absolutely. You can tell that there's an appetite in the community for this kind of tournament. I know Lorcana, they're definitely very focused on being a physical TCG, but due to Pixelborn being so successful, and we talked about on this podcast, we think it's very much contributed to the game's success. There's a large player base that has just existed on that platform and playing the game digitally and is looking for that high level competition that you can sort of get in that platform. So I think it's amazing we're finally having the big tournaments, and it was really fun to compete. And Moyen did end up top 8ing. Me and Kawa didn't quite make it. And, my biggest goal from that tournament is to, in the future, maybe convince Kawa to play real decks.
Oh, man.
Ooh.
This is, okay, so this is a hot topic of conversation to you. Basically, for the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we hopped on the podcast. We're like, okay, guys, you're sick of Ruby Amethyst. So are we. Let's try and beat it. What did these two guys do? Play Ruby Amethyst in the tournament. I'm like, come on. I'm the only person that tried to beat us. Yeah, I played Emerald Steel discard. It was pretty fun. I had a lot of fun with the deck. Unfortunately, I actually didn't face too many Ruby Amethyst players in the end, but it was awesome to see Moyen making it into the top 8 with some secret sauce in the Ruby Amethyst deck that Brendan and Moyen spoke about last week, which of course was Peter Pan Shadow. That card is absolutely insane. But yeah, as well as participate in the event, I had the honor to cast it alongside Raven. So we casted that first major event, which I believe had 282 players in total. And then yesterday, I also casted alongside Speci to, talk over. It was a smaller tournament. I think there was 32 players that signed up. Of course, Thea, you can probably talk to us a little bit about your idea of running the bigger tournaments and then the smaller ones to help support these bigger events. But what came out of that event was a super cool list that we're definitely going to be talking about later. But before we get into that, Thea, why don't you kind of talk to us a little bit, take it from the start, right? Your history in card games, your journey throughout Gwent. Yeah, go for it.
Of course. Yeah, so I started casting esports events when I was playing Gwent the Witcher card game. It kind of happened accidentally. You just play the game yourself, you get really kind of good at it, and then at some point, some people ask you to commentate on some community stuff. And I found that was more sort of, how can I put it, enjoyable at some point, because you could really understand like the intricate plays that these players are doing, and it helps you better your own game. So yeah, Gwent kind of died off recently, and this Disney game just happened to come out, and I've been playing it since day one. But the problem is you have to go to physical tournaments, and then when this online client sort of emerged, I was super keen to do more of these events, and there just wasn't really a lot of them going on. So I thought this might be the way to go about it. Now, obviously, I'd love to cast events, but there are none to cast at the moment either. So I'm really glad you got to help me cast these events, and it's cool to see that some people are at least getting something more out of it than just competing. And right now I'm just funding the prize pool myself. Obviously not sustainable in the long run. The second tournament coming up, I have fully funded it through people, which is awesome. I had some anonymous donations from some of the viewers to go directly into the prize pool. And then we had a small fundraiser tournament, which garnered another $470, which is going to the $1,335 tournament. So that's awesome. We don't have sponsors yet, but I assume at some point we'll reach an in-between where there is an entry fee, but there's an even larger prize pool, maybe heading towards $2,000, etc. It really does depend on Disney Lorcana's announcement of future competitive plays and see what the industry standard is. So I can sort of work on that and provide sort of in between for people who can't afford to go to physical events or can't afford to buy physical cards, etc.
Yeah, the topic of sponsors when it comes to card games is really interesting because Kawa and I partially come from a Marvel Snap background. I come more from a Flesh and Blood background. But being a physical TCG and having physical game pieces that you can buy, your relationship with sponsors for tournaments, whether you're running them in paper or online, is much more symbiotic because in something like Marvel Snap, you think about a sponsorship and you think about the kind of company that would sponsor that. There's nothing that really feeds off of Marvel Snap, right? Maybe it's like a VPN or some sort of online tool or something like that. But in a physical card game, you can go to the local game store level or on like a bigger distributor, right? And you can use these things like one-click checkouts or like these APIs you can link to their website. And basically people, they can look at decks and you can have links. And then now it's like the symbiotic relationship where people can use their service and actually support your sponsor. So I think that you probably will have no problem finding sponsors soon enough because there's tons of stores out there that are selling Lorcana. And even local game stores, of course, but even these sort of bigger box retailers, not talking about Target, but more these bigger distributors that exist in the United States and Europe. It's one of the best things about a game like this is it affords a lot of opportunities for sponsorship.
That's really good to hear. I mean, yeah, I reached out to some card games at first, and I think that was a big mistake because they're like, why would we want to work with our competitor card game? So I got a very polite no thank you, literally one sentence from the one card game, and then I was like, all right, let's go to sleeves. And they're like, yeah, we don't do physical prize pools, but we can give you all the sleeves you want. I'm like, give me those sleeves. That's awesome. I think it's a Dragon Shield, actually.
Oh, that's huge. Yeah. That's really
yeah.
Cool.
I mean, really cool to have a relationship with them. But I think the way to go is, like you said, similar goals. So maybe TCG player, all the card game, the European ones as well. Can't recall what it's called right now, but
card market. Yeah.
Yeah, if that happens at some point, I mean, yeah, what we'll have is free tournaments with even bigger prizes, which is really what I want. Because my goal is to get as many eyes as possible in the game. Because right now, like many of my card game friends don't even know this exists, and I mean, you two should know it with your backgrounds too. Like, it's so sad for me when I post on my Gwent YouTube channel a Disney Lorcana video, and people are like, "What's this?" And I'm like, oh my goodness, there's no advertising happening yet. People don't know about this game, and that's a problem unless they change it in this first to second quarter of 2024. Then we're talking,
It's interesting because I come from, like I said, the physical TCG space, specifically Flesh and Blood, and most of the people in that game know of Lorcana, but they will not engage with the game until it has a competitive circuit. And I just want to sort of branch off of that specifically because, we're supposed to have an announcement soon. Then Q2 2024, we're supposed to actually start competitive play. What are your hopes for the competitive circuit of Lorcana? What do you envision?
Well, accessibility firstly. So my real fear is if this blows up, how they're going to facilitate thousands upon thousands of people wanting to compete in this sort of tournament. So are they going to have a public sphere where they do this? Is it just going to be sort of little events going on all over the show? Is it going to be online, physical, and is there going to be proper funding and proper advertising along the way? So for me, it's if Ravensburger can truly hold up their own in the international league, can they compete with other card game tournaments? And I think we'll see soon, It will depend how healthy this card game is going forward. Like you said, if people are interested in taking this up full time as a professional esports player.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Just speaking about what kind of Brendan has iterated upon previously, I think the best thing that Ravensburger can do, and I really hope that they've done this already, is learn from these other card games within this industry and take away from that and kind of, meld it into their own thing, but take a lot of the standards, like Brendan said, how Flesh and Blood format their stuff, how Magic do the Pro Tour, stuff like that, because they know that works. They can utilize that and then just integrate it into their own kind of card game system. So, yeah, Brendan, I think you talked about this a little bit already, but what would be your ideal, okay, we get the announcement tomorrow. What do you want to hear from Disney Lorcana?
Well, first thing I want to say is that there is an industry standard that they can look towards. Unfortunately, there is two industry standards. There is the Magic the Gathering and the Flesh and Blood. Flesh and Blood probably being ahead of Magic in terms of how robust that OP is. But then on the other hand, there's a polar opposite, which is something like One Piece, which I really hope they do not go in the direction of. One Piece is a fantastic game, but the organized play is pretty rough, mostly because the tournaments are first come, first serve. They're very hard to get into. They sell out. And all prizing is done through promos. And that can be very lucrative. at first. Unfortunately, promo pricing is inherently Ponzi-nomic and it just trends downward over time. And you see Bandai recycle their card games, sort of every 3 years at that as well. I hope that they come out and they look at Magic the Gathering or Flesh and Blood, which is something like $1 million+ pro circuit. And in terms of tournaments, that would be your local game store, your local events, allowing you to sort of maybe qualify for higher level events. They could, in the first 1 to 2 years, maybe get rid of that qualification system and make these open tournaments. After the local game store, there's maybe some sort of regional circuit culminating in a national championship. There will be 1 to 2 Pro Tours per year. Pro Tours are usually invite only, but in the first year, they could be open. Pro Tours are like this apex event. You have 1 to 2 per year. And then ultimately, you have the World Championships, which is like probably invite only, you qualify for it, etc. And then in terms of accessibility as well, when it comes to Pro Tours and Worlds, obviously that can be like 300 to 500 people, can only be qualified players. But what they can do is they can run it at these large conventions that sometimes already exist, things like SEG cons or something like that. And then when they run the Pro Tour on the day after, for players that don't make day 2, or players that are coming casually, which is a lot of the people that come to these conventions, they can run something like a large open tournament as well. So the private tournament, and then they have an open tournament on the second day, and they run it over the course of 2 to 3 days. This is like, for me, this is the industry standard I hope they look towards, and the game would be much, much more interesting if we do get that. I do hope so, and it sounds like from what we've heard sort of in whispers that that's maybe the direction they're taking. I don't know in terms of compensation, prize pool, but in terms of structure, it looks like they're looking more towards the Flesh and Blood and Magic the Gatherings than something like One Piece, which is really good for us, because that's tournaments for all of you to play. That's high competitive integrity. That's lots of casting, ideally production on top of that, all of which I think is very, very important for the success and health of this game. The casual player base is definitely the foundation, but I think the competitive player base is also very important, and they help push the game to its heights.
It's more like meta development as well. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that we've seen from your tournaments, Thea, is we're like, okay, the biggest hot topic in Lorcana right now is Ruby Amethyst is the best deck. And these online tournaments give players the opportunity to really try and tackle this problem, see if they can take down this absolute monster of a ink color combination. So it's something that I've discussed with Raven and even some other Marvel Snap content creators, to say that if you had something like weekly tournaments, as we're seeing from Thea at the moment, or even monthly tournaments, how quickly can a meta develop? How many different deck archetypes can you see? Like, it's really interesting. If you went to go and play in your locals in one part of the world, you could say, oh, this is a really popular deck. And then you go to somewhere else and they say, this is a really popular deck. So I do love to, see as many ink color combinations as possible. And, it's really, really good. Like, one thing I actually want to know is, I think in a few sets of Disney Lorcana, let's say we get to set 5, set 6, I would love to see some properly produced, like, multiplayer shows. I don't know if you guys are too familiar with any of the Commander shows that are kind of online at the moment, like Commander at Home, stuff like that. Tolarian Community College, they're a Magic the Gathering channel. They do some amazing multiplayer stuff. I think that's what's going to set Disney Lorcana apart from all of the competitive stuff, which of course we want to see. But that will really keep all of the true Disney fans engaged to see, oh, Mufasa's actually battling Zazu from set 6 or something like that. You know what I mean? I think that's going to be super, super cool. But yeah, drawing back to the original point, I think as we see more events develop, be that online or in person, it just helps to continue to help the meta evolve and help new deck archetypes come out. Because something I always think about is, I wonder if Ravensburger is sitting there like thinking, oh my god, everyone's still playing Ruby Amethyst. They haven't discovered the secret sauce yet. But yeah, it's really interesting.
That's that.
Yeah,
Copium.
Agreed. I mean, a game's dying when it becomes stale after several years, and I feel like it's better to see this one evolve a little bit quicker to an extent. Like in chapter 1, you had your clear Ruby Amethyst list with Alpha, that was it. And now we already have like more colors kind of competing. Like you didn't really have that in your set 1 tournaments, at least not at a high level. And I can already see some competition here. The fact that, like you said, in my tournament, the top 8, there was actually a list that wasn't Ruby Amethyst that almost won as well, but for a bad round 1 draw. I mean, that says everything, right? If that list did win, it would become meta, I feel. Almost meta. There's not enough people aware of these things yet. But like you said, if we have the content creation sphere and we have multiple tournaments being publicized, then yeah, you're going to have a healthy meta with a lot of different archetypes.
I actually think that list is meta. After it top 8'd, so I know we talked about it a lot. I'm sure a lot of other content creators did, but if you looked at the aggregate stats of the tournament, you're like, okay, 7 of 8 Ruby Amethyst. There's really no information to pull away here. Maybe just a more optimized Ruby Amethyst list. I think that Steel Sapphire list was very, very, very good, and that's not because it got second. That's because we actually tested the deck, and that's a very, very solid deck, and I'm really impressed by it. The color combination of Sapphire Steel specifically was very underwhelming to me in set 1, but very, very fun to play. Drawing your entire deck, comboing with Bell, that was a fun thing to do, but you get the card draw engine through Beast and some of these other tools that come in set 2. That deck is solid. And I think that if we ran back your tournament the same number of players, maybe next weekend we would have a very, very different top 8, to be honest. Also, your top 16 was very, very diverse. So your top 8, 7 of 8 Ruby Amethyst, I know, but the top 16 was actually quite diverse. So, that bubble goes a little bit different. We could have had a very, very different story, which is interesting.
Very true. Yeah, I think you're correct. The next tournament coming up this weekend, I think we had some problems initially with the online site where people who didn't check in correctly didn't know that they weren't checked in, and then sort of 100 people kind of just didn't compete. So it's been optimized now that you have to self-check in and you have to have your deck submitted, which was why nobody went through. I think this one will have up to 400 or 500, and if we have that, perhaps we'll see an entirely different meta here with the Steel Sapphire list. That would be interesting to see if these tournaments actually get the meta to evolve properly, like you would hope. You guys should make another list, a third one, and throw it in there. See what happens.
So, Theo, I just want to ask you why Lorcana specifically. I know you said you came from Gwent, but what caught your interest with this game in particular?
Lorcana. Yeah, well, at first I was considering it and not really paying attention to it. And I don't know, like fate wanted it to. One of my friends came to my house on the day with 2 boxes, said he managed to pull it, and he was like, would you like a box? I know you're into card games. And that's when I opened it on stream, and I was like, well, now I'll
you got your Enchanted that day, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was so
insane.
Enchanted. Yeah, that's what got me hooked. It was my first TCG, so first physical card game, and it was like kind of surreal having it and holding cards in my hand. And then I went to my first game in Miami. It was a big TCG convention going again this year. Really like the guy who's organizing it, Eric. And as I was playing with people in person, it was just like some surreal experience actually being able to see my opponent. So it became more of a social game than a in my room alone, without a camera on game. And that to me, that's why I'm so interested in the community this time around, because I feel like it's all about the person you see on the other side of the screen, So that, and I was very impressed with the mechanics of the game at first sight. For a lot of card games, I get sponsored all the time, more than I can count, to do these little niche card games that come out, and they almost always die within the first week. As you guys might know, if you are working with these companies, and it's so tragic to see, like even DC Dual Force didn't make it a month.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was very clear on the get-go that the mechanics were absolutely broken, and this couldn't really be fixed. Like, it was very clear. With Disney, there aren't really any broken mechanics I can find so far that indicates a lack of expertise in the field. So I want to say these people look like they know what they're doing. It looks like there is potential. It's too early to tell, obviously, but yeah, with like 204 cards being released every set and no real issues so far, I think this game could be very fun down the road with more cards being released. And compared to all the other card games that already exist, I like to start off when a card game starts off. It feels more sentimental to me. That's how Gwent started 2016. That got me hooked. Magic the Gathering, Runeterra, those all feel like I can't even compete. I'm so far behind. I'd never be part of the core community like the others, and I'd rather just start off from scratch and develop with the game as it goes along.
Absolutely. What about, so in Lorcana, what is your favorite color combination? And I mean, we don't even have to say color combination. What is your favorite archetype to play?
I mean, I do like the control. I do like the red lists very much. I did like the yellow as well. I like the fact that they're sort of built to rush. I did like that Simba, Lilo, Stitch combination. That was by far my favorite list to play without singing songs. To me, that is an entirely different archetype. But it didn't quite pull off the wins for me when I was playing against Ruby Amethyst lists. So the yellow control was still, that tank combo, grab your sword, those were all excellent. But the purple allows for more card draw, and the red really provides for control. And it seems to be developing in that direction still, which is why it ends up winning so much. But I still think yellow and steel has a lot of potential. But you do have to incorporate some strong archetypes like the singing, or else, I don't know, it doesn't quite pull it off just yet. We'll see how it develops. Green is also a little bit fun, a lot of like messing with your opponent's hand and stuff. I do like that a lot, but not yet on a competitive level. It seems to be a bit of a meme color,
What are your thoughts on evasives in the Ruby Amethyst list specifically?
Very interesting. It's extremely specific. It's something that could be problematic because it's one of those things where you have to include a card to deal with that card. It's like either you have an answer or you don't. Like you end up with rock, paper, scissors mechanics where it's like, did my opponent bring an answer to my rock, or are they losing? So we saw with the last tournament that people specifically started including fidget in their list to deal with mini. And again, that card serves no other purpose but to kill mini. And if you have enough of those types of cards, you end up with a very, again, rock, paper, scissors type of tournament where somebody brings one thing and another person brings the answer, and that's sort of it. We'll see, though. We'll see. We did see it in set 1 as well, with the Pongo sort of card also being an evasive. And again, you have that similar thing going where you either have an answer or you don't have an answer. And it could be a big problem for you if you don't.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't know if you know, Thea, and I guess, I don't know if Brennan and Moyne can actually call this their claim to fame, but very much it was like the early Ruby Amethyst days in set 1, and Brennan and Moyne were theory crafting, saying, okay, how do we kind of beat the mirror? What's going on? They're like, evasives. They were the first people that I publicly saw really push the evasive package, and then within 2 weeks, we saw Pongos, we saw Goofies, and that was a real centerpiece of the set 1 Ruby Amethyst list. But me personally, I'm really enjoying the set 2 version, mainly because the list plays a lot faster. Like, I know for the most part we call it a control list, but you can nearly call it a tempo list because it's so flexible in what it does, right? It gets out there so fast. You can get the aggressive questing with the evasive Minnie Mouse. The Madam Mim Merlin package is just absolutely insane. Like, all those rabbits being able to draw you so many cards is absolutely absurd. But the flexibility that the deck offers, right? You can turn it into an aggro deck, but then you can also switch it back and turn it into that more control deck with your Be Prepared, your Ursulas, your Lady Tremaines, right? It's really nice to see how flexible the color has become now. Like, back in set 1, I would honestly dread playing Ruby Amethyst mirrors, because what would usually happen is it would be game 1. Whoever wins game 1 wins the whole thing, because game 2 is going to go to a tie. So, yeah, I've really enjoyed casting the kind of Ruby Amethyst mirror matches now. And also because, like you were mentioning, Tia, like, people are bringing so many different cards within the deck now, right? We see the Fidget to try and answer the Minnie Mouse. We've seen the Peter Pan Shadow, also another great Minnie Mouse tech and evasive card, be included within the list. But then, yeah, it comes back to the problem of, if your Fidget isn't killing the Minnie Mouse, what is it doing? It's just a dead card, and it's just going to be ink. It's going to be in the inkwell the entire time, right? But yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed how the deck has evolved. Similarly, how the Amber Steel Song deck has evolved as well, right? Previously, you just had the kind of aerial combo, your big cards like your Surfer Stitches, Rockstar Stitches, and now, as I want to believe Moyne made popular, the flutes. I think the flutes are super cool, right? It's nearly like your own spell book if you're playing Amethyst, right? Being able to gain lore by not questing with characters, I think, is like super interesting, and it just gets me super excited. Like, bringing back, there's a sorcerer spell book.
Don't ask me why I have those on my desk.
Bringing it back to like what you were saying about all of the different color combinations, I think this game is incredibly well balanced. I think it is like superbly well balanced. It's something that myself and Brendan and Moyne have talked about numerous times. Even if you look at the Pixelborn data, we can see that Ruby Amethyst is pretty dominant and stuff, but across the board, a lot of the ink color combinations, they do pretty well against each other. And yes, if you have, like you mentioned, that rock, paper, scissors kind of archetype, that's not really a bad thing. That's kind of it's good because yes, you try and see if your opponent has the answer if they don't have the answer, but it's like there was a stage in the meta where we had like the new hotness, which was the Sapphire Ruby deck, right? This new deck that came out of nowhere at the start of set 2. What beat that deck? Aggro beat that deck. What beats Aggro? Steel Song beats that. What beats Steel Song? Ruby Sapphire, right? So it is literally this rock, paper, scissors archetype. But that's what a meta is, right? And I think for the most part, it's really, really great to see how well balanced this game is.
Mm-hmm. It's dynamic as well. The metagame, a physical card game metagame is it tends to be stale, right? It tends to get solved pretty quickly. And, we have a pretty fast release schedule with Lorcana specifically, but it is still slow compared to a digital card game, especially something like Marvel Snap. That being said, the Lorcana metagame is very dynamic. It is constantly in flux, and it's very impressive. I mean, the narrative of set 2 was Ruby Sapphire, for sure. 100%. That was the deck to beat. Nothing was beating that. It looked borderline overpowered. Then, we had Steel Song get a bit more optimized. Ruby Amethyst came back into the metagame, and now we have Steel Sapphire coming in. We have the discard list be innovated. It's absolutely incredible. And hats off to the designers and developers for that. I want to ask you, Thea, in regards to Lorcana and its fundamental mechanics, things like the ink mechanic, right? Your card functions as a resource and as a card you can deploy onto board. Do you think this game is approachable and easy to play for players sort of experiencing it for the first time? And do you think that the game has a lot of depth past that? Does it have this easy floor and then a lot of competitive depth where you can really dig, into the game?
Yeah, it's a good question. Since I'm already sort of an experienced card game player, I really try to think if I were maybe a teenager and this was my first card game, if I could get into it. I do think at this point you can. And I'm curious how much in depth they do want to go if one of their main target audiences are children, because it's Disney. At the end of the day, that's what you're going to get, which isn't a bad thing at all. It's a very nice entry for them into the card game world. For experienced card game players, it could be a bit simple at this point. I've heard of some who aren't getting into it just yet because you have Magic the Gathering, something that's been there for years and it's incredibly in depth. But I do think this game has a lot of potential for getting really complicated over the years. And some people theorize set 3 was just made to have sort of your basic entry-level gameplay, and then it goes from there. But yeah, the fact that you have that extra dimension of having to ink your cards for mana, it doesn't just give it to you, that's really cool. Now we have locations coming in. Now, I haven't read all the location leaks yet, but I mean, even if we had some sort of movement potential between where you place a card on the board, that is already another entirely different dimension. You can get some card games, you have to have a chess-like strategy. Where are you going to move your thing? When can you move it there? So, already I'm extremely impressed by the amount of mechanics. Like you have your sing mechanics, even that, I love that. I love the fact that you have to calculate whether you're going to play your card as is or if you're going to replace it onto a different card. The lore, having to quest, all of that, I'm incredibly impressed by. So I think it has the potential to become extremely in-depth. Right now, it's a very good level for current card game players and newbies, and hopefully it gets even more in-depth with the next set.
Mm-hmm. I want to get your thoughts specifically on the inking system, because I recall an article that was written by a Magic the Gathering player. I think their name is Sam Black. I could be wrong. This wasn't, but they were referring to this idea of when you have these cards that can function dual as resources and as cards that you can deploy. That it's actually a very, very punishing system. It's an extremely hard system because at face value it looks very simple, right? I put my card down every turn. I play my cards, but because you have the choice of what card to put down every single turn, it actually exponentially increases the amount of mistakes you can make. And actually, skill in a card game is just at least we believe on this podcast, is minimizing mistakes, basically trying to trend towards that perfect form of a game. What are your thoughts on that inking mechanic? Do you think it has a lot of depth? Do you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, absolutely. I like it when the ceiling for an IQ in a game is exceptionally high. I don't like it when it comes down to odds. I want it to be chess-like almost, where you can really see somebody constantly winning and it's not luck. And I love the fact that when you're deck building, you have to determine how much non-inkable cards you can put in the deck. And I love the fact that it can be used as resources. So at some point you have to think, is it actually worth throwing this card away right now for more potential ink? Or am I keeping the physical card itself? I personally like that. I didn't think it's a bad thing making a game infinitely more potentially complicated. So you can still have children playing it and they understand what inking is, and then you can have a 40-year-old expert playing it knowing how to abuse that system against their opponent, right? Personally, I'm a fan. I think it makes this game unique.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite aspects, to be honest. I think that the depth is just, it's incredible because, especially at first glance, it looks so simple. And that was before I actually played Lorcana. I was very critical of the design, mostly due to its simplicity. But as soon as I got my hands on the actual card pool, I mean, it's kept me intrigued since. I mean, like I mentioned, there is no other physical card game that I've played that has had such a dynamic metagame. We don't necessarily have these big marquee tournaments like Pro Tours and like Worlds to really cement, like this is the best deck. So that might be why it's in flux. But ultimately, the design just feels very well done and the decks feel very close in power level. I know Ruby Amethyst makes a lot of top 8s. I know it does. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of other lists that are very, very close to it. And like I mentioned with your tournament, Thea, is that top 16 was very diverse. And it doesn't get enough respect because the top 8 was so dominated by Ruby Amethyst, but that top 16, and there was tons of Amber Steels. There was just tons of archetypes. I think there was some discard decks up there. So, a different kind of bubble. We could have seen a very, very different metagame. Anyway, I want to ask you in regards to your interest in the game in the future, does it specifically lie with that competitive play? Is that your sort of future interest? Are you looking to be mostly involved on the competitive side?
Yeah, for sure. The reason I'm playing a competitive card game is to be competitive, right? Like if I wanted to, I'd relax and play some Fallout 4, but here we are. So for me, the question is, do I play as a player? Do I play as do I want to be a caster? Do I want to be a tournament organizer? Because all three are just so freaking fun. I say why not all of them, but I know that's not how it works. You have to really put in effort into one, and you can't simply be all of the above. So for now, I'm doing what I possibly can, which is I play when I have time, and I try and host weekly to bi-weekly tournaments to get more people interested in the game. And if there ever were casting opportunities, there are so many different tournaments being held in person these days. Not any official ones yet, but I love casting too. So whatever opportunities there are, that's where I'll be drifting to. But this is certainly the game I am investing all my time in the next year, at least, to see, we'll see how healthy the game is by the end of 2024. So I can't really speak for the future after that.
Mm-hmm. In regards to those tournaments, what is like the ceiling on that? Where do you see the future going with those tournaments you're hosting right now? Because we are in the early days. You're 2 tournaments in. Like, what is your grand vision? Like, if you get the sponsors you're looking for, if you get the interest you're looking for, what are you looking to, like, what is your sort of aspirational kind of tournament to host?
Wow. Certainly, again, right now it started off as something trying to, like, grant people, it answers a demand, right, for tournaments. So if Disney Ravensburger come out with an official tournament, we'll look at what it gives people and what demands are still lacking. So maybe they have a cap at a certain amount of players and there are still all these players who can't do this, or maybe it's a physical event, many people can't go to that. We'd have to know whether there's an official answer on whether Pixelborn is something that can coexist with Ravensburger's view of how the game should be. If I had everything I wanted, I would reach a point where we have physical tournaments being done in North Carolina, and I could fly people out to do it and help pay for that. Because essentially I would want the best players to compete. And that's already something that's sort of like an idea floating around there in North Carolina right now with my boyfriend Jimmy. We both like the game, but it would really depend on what we currently have, what we don't have, and what we have a need for. So for now, I just have this invitational word floating around. So every time somebody wins a big tournament, they go to the invitational. We don't yet know what that is. But I'm planning to make it bigger than just your normal online tournament. Not necessarily in person, but I'm trying my best.
That's actually like my favorite thing for when I cast different events, is highlighting these players and giving them a platform, right? You get to find some of the best players in the world, especially with the online events, right? It's not like region locked or anything like that. So giving these players a platform and a place to shine is absolutely amazing, and it's one of my favorite things to do and when casting, because not only does the community learn amazing things from these players, I learn as well. It's one of the, like, it's what you talked about, Tia, as well. It's one of my favorite things because I feel like I'm constantly improving my game as I'm casting and still breaking down these like analytical turns. So yeah, that would be like a dream for me as well to see, you know, like when we envision what this OP program will hopefully be, we want to have, you know, a world championship with the best players in the world. And I think the thing that's gonna not stop that from happening, but the barrier will be exactly what you said, accessibility. Is it all gonna be, oh, you have to travel to this event, it's gonna be capped? Like I would love a world where, like you said, we could have this cohesion between the online client and the physical events, because I don't know if it's actually been properly done in any other major card games. Like, Brendan, you would know more than us. In Magic the Gathering, right? Like, what are the best online Magic the Gathering arena players? Like, do they get invited to any sort of events? Like,
Yeah.
do you know the kind of correlation between that?
They do, but that it took a while for that to be implemented. So you can qualify via online play and play in person at the Pro Tours. That didn't happen before. So like COVID threw a wrench in all of that, and Magic actually, they got rid of their Pro Tour for a while, then it came back. So the current system, yes, you can. It's a bit more convoluted than you would think, but it does technically exist in terms of like you can qualify online. I want to ask you, Thea, in regards to Pixelborn. I'm not going to ask you whether you like you think it's good for the game or not, because I know you do. But what do you think is the future of Pixelborn, and how important do you think it is for Lorcana? Can you just dive into your thoughts specifically regarding that platform?
Yeah, without even mentioning Pixelborn specifically, then the online game is very good for any card game. I mean, you often have people don't have the money to just buy cards immediately, and moreover, they don't have money to buy thousands of dollars of boxes of cards so they can draw the good cards. So a lot of times people want to try it out online first, and then they go and purchase the cards for in-player tournaments. So I think it's incredibly important, especially like you mentioned with COVID. I mean, Gwent had a in-person tournament system, Gwent Masters, and I was going to cast my very first one in Poland, and then COVID struck. And we essentially never had that happen up until the end of last year. It all became online, and they quickly had to have a client. And without that client, we wouldn't have had any Gwent tournaments. And, you know, things happen where people can't physically go to a place. And I think it's very important to have accessibility for all via an online client. And the fact that Pixelborn was made by a fan, he's not asking any money, it's all bringing people to Disney in my point of view. I think that's awesome. So whether Ravensburger wants to work with him in the future, buy the client, maybe even ask for advice to build their own client, I'm all for that. I don't think anybody would have any complaints. Right now, I don't know a single player who isn't playing online and then going to physical tournaments to do it afterwards.
Absolutely. I've said this about, so Flesh and Blood also, and I know I've mentioned Flesh and Blood a lot in this podcast. Flesh and Blood also has an online client, which is not recognized by the publisher. They haven't recognized it for years, but they let it exist because they've taken out other online derivatives. And my sort of theory about this, or philosophy, is that the number one contributing factor to the success of a card game is people playing that card game. And the online clients and the online versions of those games only sort of perpetuate that and improve it. And that's I think that Ravensburger recognizes that Pixelborn is maybe the best thing that's ever happened to them. I genuinely believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, I'm just thinking back, like when I first got the game, all I did was open the cards on stream and look at the cards. And I remember the cards sitting very neatly on my desk until more came out. And it wasn't until there was one physical tournament that I kind of could play them. And it was really sad because I didn't know how to play the game either yet. And I didn't have anybody near me who had cards so I can play against them. And even when we played against each other, we didn't quite understand how some of the mechanics work. And when Pixelborn came out, that's when I really hit this game. And I didn't stream it for about a month or two either, because I wasn't sure, you know, which way I had to go about it. But that's when I got into Pixelborn. So now I take that and I go to physical tournaments and I'm ready. But yeah, finding those friends to play with, I mean, you don't have somebody who has thousands of dollars invested in years of a set. You know what I'm saying? So it's very nice to have that online opportunity to do so.
Yeah, like it is incredibly costly to get invested into a TCG. This is also my first physical card game, and I'm very fortunate. And it's really really nice for me. Like my beginnings, I've talked about it on the podcast already. Was I was at Gamescom for the PC launch of Marvel Snap. Ravensburger had a booth. Myself and my girlfriend, we wandered over because we heard about this Disney card game. We enjoyed card games. And exactly like you, Thea, we bought a few boxes, we cracked them open, we're like, oh, we got Elsa, we got this, because she's a huge Disney nerd. Like, we love Disney completely, wholeheartedly. But again, like, we still have a shared collection. This is how expensive it is, right? And again, I'm very fortunate that I learned the game with her. I have that person to kind of bounce back and forth. We get to play it together. But right now, as we're preparing for a major in-person tournament at the end of this week, I'm playing on Pixelborn. She's playing on Pixelborn. Like, this is the tool. Like, yes, we could play against each other, but I mean, Brendan's talked about this so much time, you know, the in-person practice versus the online practice, right? Okay, if I want to test a deck and I'm playing against my girlfriend, okay, let me sleeve up this deck, let me play it. Okay, now you grab this deck as well. Oh no, we're sharing cards between these decks. It gets really complicated really fast, and this is where the benefits of a client like Pixelborn come in. I can be like, Brendan Moyne, I'm practicing for this tournament, let's hop on, let's test, let's jam. And it's just amazing, right? And like you said as well, people get to meet friends and play with them from all across the world. Many people don't have the luxury of even traveling to their local game store, and maybe some people can't even leave the house, right? How they enjoy card games is through like digital clients and stuff like that. And I think that's incredibly important. And I really hope that Ravensburger, you know, either if they publicly acknowledge Pixelborn in some fashion, or like you said, if they are secretly developing their own digital client, absolutely fantastic. But there's no doubt in my mind that it's all a benefit having a digital client like this.
You have me like reminiscing now, and you mentioned your girlfriend, because I remember how hard it was, because Jimmy and we were traveling so much for his work that we would have physical folders. I would be the person carrying it everywhere we went, and on the plane we're trying to play this card game. And we could never play the mirror match, the Amethyst Ruby mirror match, which I was practicing for because I was on my way to Miami. Because we didn't each have 8 Be Prepareds and 8 Ursulas. And again, I think we're in a very privileged position. But that guy bought, I'm talking almost $8,000 of boxes. He had to get them from sculptors because they weren't available. We still don't have 8 Ursulas. We don't have 8 Be Prepares.
I don't either, yeah.
So how are we supposed to go about this? So now we just travel with our laptops and we play against each other on Pixelborn. Easiest thing we've ever done. We collect the cards. I put them in sleeves, keep them for real tournaments, and Pixelborn's the way for us to actually play the game.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I even have like I'm going to be meeting Raven again, as I usually do when we go play in these Manchester events. And you know, Raven has a few cards, but he's like, Kawa, can I borrow some cards? I'm like, of course. So between the three of us, like it nearly gets difficult when it gets to in-person stuff. You know, we try and make it work as best as we can, but pretty much I play 2 ink colors, my girlfriend plays 2 ink colors, and then Raven plays 2 ink colors, right? So it's like, who gets the Ruby Amethyst? Who gets the Sapphire Steel? Like it, even with how invested we are in this game, and we have spent a lot of money on boxes, on cards, and gift sets, on troves. You know, it's still a huge investment to make sure you have a full set the whole time, and we will continue to do it. Like I said, I'm very lucky that we can kind of split it and go at it together. But yeah, it's difficult. Accessibility, I have to say, has been thoroughly improved though with set 2. I go into work every day and there's a store across from me, and they literally have boxes and boxes of set 2, whereas set 1, that was not the case whatsoever. So it's great to see that. I hope that continues with set 3. I hope the restocks of set 1 continue as well. I have seen a little bit of set 1 stock out there. But yeah, Brendan, I mean, you've talked about this a lot as well, right? I think you've publicly said this now. If Pixelborn didn't exist, you might not be playing the game as much as you do, right? Because you don't have the cards.
I wouldn't have. Well, I was a little bit invested because I started up a podcast for it, but that, you know, one of the hosts had left, and at that point, yes, I would have not played the game. And if I had not played the game, I probably would have kept my original thoughts regarding the design. It took me playing the game to realize how well designed it was and how balanced it was. So, yeah, I mean, Pixelborn, I genuinely believe Pixelborn has made this game what it is today. And you can take the hard line and say it saved the game because it was pretty damn close. I mean, the game was basically, you could not acquire it. And there's a lot of card games coming out. It came into a very competitive market, had a very good IP, but I mean, this game could have died without the accessibility that Pixelborn facilitated. And I think that Ravensburger, they would, if they were going to take down Pixelborn, they would have done it by now. I think they realized this is very good, good for them. They might be developing their own digital client. I would be very surprised from a board game company, but their mobile companion app is very good. So I mean, that would just be good for the players overall. I want to ask you, what do you think is the biggest aspect that is holding back Lorcana right now?
It's a good question. It's a very, very good question. Oh, I don't know if it's holding it back so much. I mean, this is not the answer to your question. It's the topic of conversation that we all want right now. Well, I know the us three want is I want to hear about OP. I'm dying to hear about it. I want to know what the future of the game is, right? If we get a good sculptured, structured idea of what the next year of this game is going to look like competitively, that's what I want to see, right? I don't think it's gonna. I do think launching the game without an OP program, as you mentioned, Brendan, was kind of an issue. And then you pair that alongside the accessibility of the game, like all the scalpers making the prices incredibly high. It was a rough start for the game right now. I think they've improved upon it. They've made the game more accessible. They're finally going to be implementing this OP program. What's holding the game back? I don't know. We've talked so much about Pixelborn, and I think Pixelborn is something that's been amazing for the game. We keep coming back to it. If Pixelborn wasn't here, I really have to agree, this game would not be as successful as it is today, by far. What are your thoughts, Tia? Is there anything else that you think is really holding the game back besides maybe the lack of cards or the lack of an official digital client?
I mean, I hate to hone in on this, but I mean, realistically, if Pixelborn was taken down tonight, I won't be playing this game again until the next event, which for me is in Florida in March. I mean, my gosh, I don't have anybody in this entire university I know who's playing this game. So where am I supposed to play it? Like, if you were to look at my desk right now, it's kind of sad. It's like I have all these cards lying around and they mean nothing to me, but they just lie there, So unless... And then, well, let's say it didn't exist, I would need more advertising and I would need a competitive scene where I'm able to actually go play this game. And even then, it would be a lot of effort, because I wouldn't be able to practice my games. I wouldn't have any prior backup to coming to that event. And like you said, it takes a long time to play this game. It's fun in tournament, but to practice, I mean, I can do games 5 minutes each if I'm playing a ramp deck, if I really wanted to, but having to shuffle it, re-sleeve, doing all of that, and the cards are so valuable, I don't want to damage them. I really have to be careful when I'm doing all of that. Yeah, so online client gone, I wouldn't be able to participate the way I'm doing. Maybe I'd consider not playing at all, to be honest. And then secondly, more advertising. So if more people are aware of the game, maybe I'd have some friends in my dorm who are willing to, pop some cards with me, have some fun. So if we can advertise this, have enough supply to go around, I think that's when Disney's gonna pop off, because it's a very, very popular IP. And I think they're sitting on a gold mine and they know this. So they're taking it slow, making sure they have enough to go around before they go all out with advertising.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think it is advertising now that you speak about it again, for sure.
For me, it's OP. I think, and by that I mean organized play. Playing games, for me, and I think there's a lot of other players like me, that I enjoy there to be a why to play a game. I like aspirational content. I like something to aspire to, a big tournament, a world championship, a pro tour, something to test my skills. Games as hedonistic fun are only so enjoyable, and I like that sort of that drive, right? That sense of success and accomplishment that you get from an organized play structure. I think it's really important to the longevity and sort of the continued interest in the game, especially for a player like me. And I know that that's not all players. Some players don't enjoy that aspect, but I genuinely think that will only heighten and improve the experience. So I really hope that they execute it correctly. Yeah, so organized play. All right, Tia, I want to ask you about Into the Inklands, your first impressions and locations. What do you think about this new mechanic? How is it going to change the game?
Oh, well, I mean, location, like I said, I think it will provide much more depth to the game. Really excited to see some more of the reveals before I make too much of an opinion on it. I mean, I've seen some pretty good cards, like the one from Treasure Planets. Can't for the life of me remember the protagonist's name, but
Jim Hawkins, yeah.
yeah. That card looked interesting. That looked really OP, depending on what the locations will do. And I mean, yeah, it's I don't know if one of you can recite exactly what it does off the top of your head. It's something like play a card, like a location, for free or something, or for a cost, or can't recall. But some of those cards look pretty strong, and I really look forward to giving them a shot. And I think locations can be a pretty good mechanic in this game if done correctly.
Yeah. My personal favorite card reveal so far, I don't know if you guys talked about it on the pod last week, Brendan, has to be that green Ursula that finds the song and just discards it. Like, finally we have an actual answer to Be Prepared. Finally we have an actual answer to a whole new world. So I think that card is like, if you took one card from set 3 and you put it into the meta right now, I think it would drastically shake up the meta. So I'm super excited to see how that card is gonna evolve the game. Something that we touched upon, our thoughts about locations initially, were that maybe it's gonna lead to a more combat focused gameplay experience. Be that with, like, so far Resist was introduced within set 2. It's been good, but we haven't seen it fully utilized because the dominant decks have been Ruby Amethyst, right, which don't really care about damaging stuff as much as fully removing it with a card like Be Prepared. So I'm personally excited that if it does go to a more kind of board-centric gameplay experience, that there's going to be more thinking involved, right? It's not going to be like, oh, the board's too big, let me just clear it really fast, right? So do you agree with that, with the introduction of locations? There's going to be kind of more of a combat-focused game? Because that's our first impression of locations initially anyways.
What do you think, Brendan?
Oh, so locations are really interesting because the best way to look at locations is, Moyen explained this, that they're basically tapped characters that come down because they can be attacked, right? And they gain passive lore, at least some of them gain passive lore, and they have these abilities, but you can always clear them. I do think that Lorcana is a game that when you first look at it, you look at the attack and defense values of all these characters and you imagine all this combat going on where you're trading, but that doesn't really happen. Like you have agnostic AoE board wipes through Be Prepared in Ruby. You have AoE board wipes in Steel that just do damage to everything. Like, combat in Ruby Amethyst is very niche. It only occurs between very, very specific decks, like maybe aggro decks. If not, they're probably just questing, right? They're just ignoring each other and questing. So the combat of the game is actually something that doesn't really get a lot of credit, or it doesn't get used a lot currently. And I think the locations will change that. Locations make a lot of mechanics a lot better, in my opinion. Things like Challenger. Challenger is a good mechanic right now because you can trade up on characters, but things like Challenger will be really good into these locations because you need to clear them. You need to clear them early because locations are fundamentally undercosted, right? But they're undercosted because they are always susceptible to being cleared by being attacked, right? I think it'll add a lot more tempo into the game. The game is already very tempo based, but having board presence will be more important in set 3 than it is right now, in my opinion, for locations. But I mean, it looks really cool. It's a cool mechanic. I'm happy they're introducing it. You mentioned something earlier, Tia, in regards to like the simplicity of design in set 1, 2, and potentially 3, and then further complicated design coming in set 4, 5, 6 plus. I think that's absolutely true, and that's a very standard practice for game design, is to have these somewhat introductory sets and then bring in the more complex mechanics later once the player base is adjusted to the game's mechanics and rules, etc. So I do think that is coming, and locations are a version of that, which I'm really excited for. One thing I want to hit on here is the tournament that you had last week was won by Ruby Amethyst. It's a different Ruby Amethyst list. It's an Aggro Ruby Amethyst list. I just want to get your thoughts on this list specifically, because it took down the entire tournament. There was plenty of Ruby Amethyst control in that tournament. What do you think about this new take on Ruby Amethyst?
So we are talking about the one with Pinocchio at 2, right? Questing for 3. I love it personally. I'm a huge fan. I have tried this list myself, a similar variation at least. I'm surprised that it did manage to beat the tournament, but I think it's getting easier and easier to beat these mirrors when your opponent doesn't really expect you to play anything else. They've just been prepping the mirror themselves. And yeah, if you aren't able to contest these cards like Maleficent and Pinocchio, then you're in a lot of trouble. And then you have the Merlin combo along with Arthur. I mean, that's in itself with Madame Mim is just an exponential amount of points. And I do like to see the 2 spell books as well in this list. Now, it's interesting to see how many people like play the spell book and how many they include, because obviously it's a non-inkable card, so you're risking that. But normally with these board clears and be prepared, they don't affect the item, which makes this nice contesting card for your normal mirror match, I would say.
How many sorcerer spellbooks do you play?
I also play 2 at this point.
Okay.
Just 2. Yeah, because I'm a bit afraid of non-inkables, to be honest. I've had too many games where I accidentally start my whole hand with them, and it's scared me ever since. So I try to keep it very even. I'm not too risky when it comes to non-inkables. And yeah, you can see here with the Maleficent, the Pinocchio, I mean, this person risked quite a bit. They had to take out some other cards, like they couldn't implement Ursula for interest's sake. You know, it's kind of difficult. It's a nice way to keep the game balanced. I like the fact that you can have non-inkables in a deck, but you are certainly punished for having too many be prepared, etc.
I want to talk about this deck a little bit. 2 cards in particular that I think really define this deck, and 2 cards that myself and Specie were quite amazed to see. We said, Fan the Flames, is that even a real card? Like, I knew this card existed, but I was like, wow, I've gained a lot of respect for this card. And the reason why I think it's so good is, let's look at 2 cards, for example, right? Let's look at Pinocchio and let's look at Arthur. We've seen Pinocchio used in these kind of aggro bounce packages before, right? You quest with Pinocchio, you bounce it back with the Madame Mim, with the snake, or with the fox, and then you replay Pinocchio, allowing you to quest again. The difference with a card like LeFou or Fan the Flames is you can re-ready Pinocchio, but you don't have to pay the cost of playing the card again, right? When you bounce the card back to your hand, oh, well, suddenly you have to actually pay 2 ink to play this Pinocchio again. The downside of leaving it on the board, yes, if your opponent is using any removal cards, like if they're steel, then they can easily kill the Pinocchio. But what I was particularly excited to see these 2 inclusions, because in a metagame where the traditional Ruby Amethyst list is quite dominant, they don't really have any removal. The main source of removal that they have, yes, is Teeth and Ambitions. We've seen this in a lot of Ruby Amethyst lists, but I think having these cards like LeFou and Fan the Flames make Pinocchio good, but particularly make Arthur absolutely insane. Because usually, if you quest with Arthur, you get the bounce. That's it. He's done your job. You're happy. If you get to trigger Arthur twice, he is absolutely insane. So yes, I think if you're playing this list in a major, like a huge tournament, it may be a little bit harder in a lot of your matchups compared to the traditional list, because if you run into steel, I feel like it's going to be, a little bit of a challenge. But if you're in a room where it's going to be primarily Ruby Amethyst, I think you're really favored in the mirror match, honestly, because you're just going to quest faster. You're going to reset your cards. You're going to keep doing what Ruby Amethyst does, which is, getting the card draw engine with your Merlins and stuff like that. But this deck basically just outpaces the traditional list at the moment. Brendan, what are your initial thoughts on the deck?
So I originally thought that, I was surprised. I was wondering, where all the steel was. But Arthur is an inherently good card against steel, actually, because it's bouncing back your early drops that quest for lots, right? Looks like the Maleficent questing for 2, the Pinocchio questing for 3, and it actually insulates those characters against something like a Grab Your Swords or like a Smash. So, while this list, when you look at it first, you're like, oh, any kind of steel deck would probably have smashed this. I actually don't think so, the more that I think about it, because I think this Arthur, it makes it so your Pinocchio can get you like 6 quests, which is over 25% of your win condition, which is ridiculous, right? It's insane. So I really like it. It's not my type of gameplay in terms of deck. I really like, more card advantage, more draw potential, more board clear. But that just tends to be what I gravitate towards. I think it's a really cool deck. It's great to see innovation. Like I said, the metagame is so dynamic. It's crazy. I just can't believe that this keeps happening in this card game. Usually card games settle on a deck or 2. And this one really doesn't. People can point at Ruby Amethyst, but Ruby Amethyst could be dethroned any week now. And I already think it has gotten pretty close to that, which is very, very exciting. I'm just happy that we're able to have these tournaments actually start to get to see the top decks, because, oh man, this is like an OG. This is like a bingo card. Podcana. The one issue we always had with the physical tournaments is they never play the top 8s. They always split. So now we actually get to see the deck lists that win.
Oh, That's
Yeah.
such an interesting thing. It's the first time I've heard of splitting. It was brought up before I did the tournament. Like, splitting's gonna happen. You can't give one person $1,000. You have to split it between the 8. And I'm like, well, just tell them they're not allowed to. And I'm like, no, but I don't want to do that. I mean, this is for the people. They should have fun. So, like, what on earth does that mean when you just split?
Yeah.
What is that?
So splitting is a risk reduction strategy that people take in the later parts of a tournament. It has there's many different levels, right? So you go into the finals against your opponent. Maybe you know them, maybe you don't, but you go, hey, do you want to split? We'll split it 50-50, or we'll split it 60-40, so we can mitigate the risk, because potentially the prize that goes to first and second is drastically different. I am very much against splitting in almost every single scenario. Where it gets a bit egregious is that you can have and a lot of card games actually outlaw this. They don't let you do this. But if you don't explicitly say this is not, people can't do this. What has happened in Flesh and Blood in early tournaments, like, people get to the top 8, the entire top 8 gets together, say, hey, do you guys want to split? There's no rule against it. They split the prize. They don't even play the top 8. And the reason why this happens so much in Lorcana is not because people are, they're being nefarious with this, but it's mostly because a lot of these early Lorcana tournaments, like the 1Ks and 2Ks in paper, were logistically taxing. Like, they were going on 12, 14 hours. People were driving 6 hours. So, they were splitting for reasonable reasons. But it was very hard in the early days to find out, like, what's actually the best list. Like, there's 5 different lists in the top 8, and we don't know what list is actually good here. So I'm happy that we get to see the winning list from the tournaments online. But splitting, I have no issue with splitting money. I think it's cowardice, but I have no issue with it. It's when people split and they don't actually play the games, where it kind of hurts the integrity of the tournament. And most tournaments say that's not okay. Obviously, technically, people can still, like, throw a game, but you can't avoid that. You just don't want people to be like, all right, it's top 8 time. We're so excited. We're going to cast it. We're going to produce it. And they're like, oh, we're not playing. It's like,
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I would simply not allow that in any of my tournaments. So you'd have to play it out. But I understand what you're saying with the physical tournaments. Yeah, it's like contractually you're obliged to, like, you're being paid for a publication. If you actually do a full-on tournament, at some point you got to pay casters, you got to pay people, and you can't pay them if they're not casting a game and there isn't a top 8 and you can't put it on TV, whatever. So if you don't do your part of the contract, which is actually competing for free, then you simply can't get part of the prize pool. But very interesting. First I've ever heard about it.
Yeah.
I think it's because it was always online up until now in the tournaments I took part in. And so I've never seen this happen in person yet.
yeah,
It happened to me the first time as well. Yeah. It happened to me the first time. It was the first time I experienced it as well. But similar to what Brendan was saying, I wanted to play the top 8. Part of me was like, I'm after driving 2.5 hours to get up here. I kind of, it's been a really long day. But the ultimate decision, again, Brendan can correct me if I'm wrong, but there is 8 of us. It was a really long day. Some people had to get flights home, had to drive home. Majority of us decided to split. But our whole mindset, and I think it wasn't an official rule because Disney Lorcana doesn't have any official OP rules yet. We basically said if one person says they want to play, we're playing the top 8, right? So, and that's also the thing, you don't want to pressure people saying, like, it was pretty much, do you want to split or do you not want to? If you want to play, we will play. It's not like, oh, come on, we've had a long day. You know what I mean? There's your own personal reason why you may want to split or not want to split. If that one person said, you know what, we're playing, we'd happily play. But yeah, the main reason why I think splitting would occur is for long days in terms of physical events. I agree with Brendan. If it's a situation where there's a broadcast and there's a huge exciting moment, okay, who's going to win the tournament? Oh, let's just split and go home. That is so bad. Like, so bad. And are you saying it happens more often than not, Brendan?
Not necessarily. It's actually quite rare, but like, because most games outlaw it as soon as it happens, they're like, okay, obviously that's not intended. I do want to impart some advice though. If you're ever playing in person and people come up to you, maybe 7 people come up to you, made top 8, and they're like, hey, do you want to split? You say, yes, absolutely. All the first. Split it all the first. That is so antithetical to anything they want. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's this card gamer mindset, this plus EV mindset where, people want to come out in the money, in cash, and there's risk reduction strategies to do that. So it's very common. But yeah, I always like to say, absolutely, we can split. Let's split it all to first.
All to first. Let's go. Yeah.
But what do you mean with all the first?
That means first place takes everything. So they're trying to split to reduce risk and, spread the prize evenly. And you just tell them, yes, you would love to split. and you just do obviously
The whole
just,
top 8 prize pool goes to first place. Yeah, let's go.
it's pretty much the opposite of what they want.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's
Yeah.
the opposite.
I like that.
Yeah, it's just a little meme because I don't know. I just think that splitting sometimes, especially like early splitting, where you're like, who wants to split top 16 or top? It's kind of cringe, you know. Like,
yeah, because then it's all about the money, and I know some people do this for a living, but it's like, no, now you're kind of taking the integrity out of the game, and that's not what we want, right? So.
Yeah.
It's like, get a job, you know.
Are you playing the game to make money? Yeah. Are you playing the game to make money, or are you playing the game because you want to play, you want to compete? That's why you should be playing the game, right?
Yeah, first place, that title, that's what you're going for. And the money is like a really cool way to take more time out of your normal job and be like, okay, I'll start doing this a bit more professionally, maybe consider doing it, half C's as a living. But it's like, if you reach that point where you need $200 that badly, it's like, dude, don't compete then. Don't do a 2-day tournament.
The stakes are dynamic, right? Because, it's like $200 at our kind of tournaments right now, but like you get to the World Championships, it's like $50K to first, $20K to second.
Yeah, it's
10K to second. And then, that's where...
$20K.
Yeah, $20K. Yeah.
You beat me.
If you beat me. Yeah, just go for the 50. All right. Well, Tia, I want to give you a chance to shout out any of your socials, what you're up to, content you're doing, future tournaments, etc. The floor is yours.
Of course. And again, thank you so much for having me on, guys. This was one of the best podcasts I've been on for Lorcana yet. Again, sorry for the backdrop. So I'm currently studying in Scotland. I just got back for semester 2. We'll be done by April. But in the meantime, you can watch for any tournaments. I have them weekly. It's done in my Discord called The Pack. You can see announcements on Thea Booysen on Twitter, or you can check me out on Discord, Twitch, YouTube, under Thea Beastie, where I'll be showing the highlights of all the tournaments there. So yeah, if you're here for Lorcana, you can definitely stick around, and I'm sure you'll find a tournament you can compete in.
Mm-hmm. And as usual, anything we talk about, so a link to that Discord, a link to the deck list, anything we mention in the podcast is going to be in the description, whether you're on pod platforms or YouTube. So just check it out there. The Twitters are obviously on screen, so you'll see that. But we want to thank you for coming on the podcast. I mean, I think that... Are you our first guest? I'm trying to even remember. I get a bit this. I think you're the first guest of
guest when it's been the 3 of us, right? Yeah. When it's been you, me, and Moyen. Yeah. So yeah, it's an honor.
Yeah, we appreciate it, and
let's go.
Yeah, we're very proud of the things you're doing in the community. You've given us a platform to compete on, which has been awesome. We had our boy Moyen top 8, so we're very proud of that. And we look forward to future tournaments. We're really excited. We're excited for the future of the game as well. I'm particularly looking forward to that Q2, or at least announcement of Q2, what that in-person paper play will look like, because I feel like there is the in-person, the essence of the card game that you get when you play it in person, sitting across from other real people, is unmatched. And I think that Lorcana will be a great sort of facilitator of that. So I hope they go deep on it, and hopefully maybe we'll be all seeing each other in some random part of the world and competing here pretty soon.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, if you all listen to this podcast, you enjoy it, the number one thing you can do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps so much. There's a video version of this on YouTube at youtube.com/@Podcana podcast. Hit that subscribe while you're there. We're all on Twitter, Kawa Tech_CG, Brennan APG, and Tia _Booysen. I said it correctly. I think so. I hope so. Okay. Awesome. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next week.